Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on counting down my top 25 favorite episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. I am doing one episode a month. This month, we're up to my number 22, which is A Taste of Armageddon from the original series. And so, here to join me, I have two special guests. I have first, there's the person who's not going to kill today, Darrin. Darrin, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, Mark, excited to be back here talking about a great, wonderful original series episode. Can't really wait to dive into this one.
And there's a multi-legged creature below me. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me once again. I really enjoy doing these top 25 discussions with you, and I'm looking forward to this one.
All right, cool. So let's start with our overall thoughts. And I know, Alyssa, me and you just talked about this in the last stream, but I'm sure we'll get into more detail this time. But so, Darrin, let's start with you. What were your thoughts on this episode?
This is just one of those great classic original series episodes that has a lot more of the mental stuff going on. You can see effects wise, they start really limiting stuff. You have the same disintegration chamber burning from a couple of different angles. You have the disruptors where they just make a noise. They don't even bother doing any of the big phaser kind of visuals or anything like that. And yet it is so perfectly encapsulate where this show goes the best is doing those kind of psychological, those cultural perceptions. How do we view war? What are the decisions we make of it? How easy is it to fall into a repetitive system because it's now sanitized and clean as opposed to the dirtiness that actual war, happens, considering, we were right in the middle of Vietnam when this was going on. War was still a very pertinent discussion in the culture at the time, as it maintains through today. And I think this really kind of hit a lot of the ideas of if you sanitize, if you push things off, if you're not experiencing it, where at the time you're seeing a lot of stuff on TV, but you're not really part of that, it gets very easy to just accept it and allow it to go on unless you're really exposed to the dirtiness, the real consequence of war. That is why you try to avoid it at all costs. And I think this show just does a great job of going from the diplomatic to the warrior way and finding a great way to sort of settle this question for the audience.
Awesome. And Alyssa, your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, we did just talk about this in a previous stream, but yeah, and I can just reiterate everything Darrin was saying. That, I mean, it's exactly right. That's what makes this episode so great. This is season 1 when they were still really doing those anti-war episodes before they mocked the hippie movement in season 3, which don't even get me started on that. But this episode, arguably, is more relevant now and more relevant in the 90s than it was then. And obviously I wasn't alive during this time, so I don't know. It was obviously made as a response to the Vietnam War, which, as Darrin mentioned, was the war that was happening. So there was already this sense that we were becoming detached from the horrors of war, and that's why there was this maybe a movement of people who were in favor of the war, because we're detached from the horrors of it. And it's really post-Vietnam when we started seeing people come back and started seeing the trauma that was caused, the PTSD that was caused to them, that this becomes more to light. And I am of the age that I was in, I think it was in high school. Yeah, it was high school when Desert Storm was happening. And I remember that we would actually take time out from our classes to we would roll the TV into the classroom, the big giant TV on the cart with wheels on it, and we would watch CNN and watch the coverage of Desert Storm, and it was like watching a video game, watching a TV show, and at that time I just remember thinking how detached we are from what is actually happening. They're not showing footage of, children getting limbs blown off on CNN. They're like really glorifying it. And that's what, when Desert Storm happened, like everybody just accepted that this was a thing we needed to do, and everybody was all in favor of it. Several years later, a decade later, the Iraq War happens. And initially, the anti-war movement was the minority. I remember attending a protest in New York City, and it got no media coverage because the media and everybody was all on board with, yes, we believe these lies that there's massive weapons of mass destruction and all of that. And it was very much being pushed by the media, and none of the actual horrors of war are being broadcast to us. We're completely detached. So over the years, we've just become, this episode has just become more and more relevant and is still very much today. And so a lot of the original series episodes you watch, and maybe they don't hold up anymore, but this is one that actually really holds up strongly. I would point to the Cloud Minders as another one that probably is more relevant today than it was back then. So this is a really good watch, putting aside all the cheesy things that like Darrin mentioned, like the disruptor that just goes, and you don't see anything. And like, William Shatner's acting, not gonna kill today, and those sorts of things. Putting aside all of that kind of hamminess and cheesiness that comes hand in hand with watching an original series episode, this is a really powerful message that you can just watch again and again and still holds up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I would say about this episode. I think this is the one from the original series that is, I mean, you mentioned this already, Alyssa, but it's the one that is more relevant now than it was when it first came out. And I think this is the episode that's the most that way in that regard. And that's one of the reasons why I really hold it in really high esteem. And there's also like the Iraq War, by the way, you mentioned the one in the early 2000s. The statistic is the protests worldwide for that war were actually bigger than the protests for the Vietnam War. There were more people there, but they were less covered, and they were trying to be swept under the rug more. And I remember watching this daytime talk show where this person came out saying she was against the Iraq War, and she got ridiculed, and people were making fun of her and laughing at her and shit. And so that was the feeling. But also what the episode brings up to me is even more modern, which is why I think is more relevant today, is stuff like drone strikes and stuff, and how people are so disconnected from the actual war being involved. They can just sit in a computer room in Arizona and murder a bunch of people at a wedding by using drone strikes without even having to be anywhere near them. But if you actually had to fight in that war and kill someone close range with a knife who's trying to kill you, quite different. Maybe you wouldn't want to do it if you were in that situation. It makes war easier, and a lot of modern technology, and this is what I always say about gun violence and stuff. People are like, well, guns don't kill people. But if you make it easier, if you give someone, all they have to do is stand there and put their finger like this, it makes it easier to kill people, so it's going to happen more. And this is what this is the whole point of this episode. If all you got to do is press some buttons and people on the other side of the world are going to walk and disintegrate themselves, then you're just making war way too easy. And that's Kirk's whole point of this. And I love it. And I also love, this is just a really fun adventure episode, and it brings up a lot of morality questions, which we'll get into as we talk about it. And it has some really great character moments. Like, I love what Kirk decides to do. He shits all over the Prime Directive in this episode, but it makes it really interesting. And then they have that absent bureaucrat ambassador, and Scotty standing up to him was amazing. Like, there's just so many things I love about this episode, which is why it's my number 22. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. So let's start with the disregarding code 710. So at the start of the episode, they're on their way to is it Aminar 7 is the planet, and Anon 7's the dude who runs it. Okay, that's confusing. But anyway, they're on their way to Aminar 7 and for a peace mission, and they get this message, Code 710, which means under no circumstances are you going to go to this planet. And the ambassador is like, disregard that code, and Kirk's really pissed off about it, and he's like, you could start an interstellar war. But then the ambassador is like, look, this tons of people have been dying. This is a strategic, I can't remember his reasoning, but apparently it's a strategically important planet. And if they had some peace treaty negotiations, it would prevent all these deaths. He's like, look, I will risk the war because a lot of people's lives are depending on it. We need this peace treaty. So here's the question I have, is because I've heard this thing saying the Ambassador Fox is an idiot, because there's been other commodores or ambassadors or commissioners or whatever who do stupid shit just so the plot could happen. Alyssa, you and I were just talking about Galileo 7 and about how this guy, the commodore there, is like, I gotta get to here on time, so you gotta leave those people to die. Like, to me, that was ridiculous. But I actually kind of defended Ambassador Fox in this episode because I think he has a point. I think that, and maybe one could also compare this to one of the episodes you hate the most, Alyssa, A Spectre of the Gun, where Kirk actually does the same thing, where there's an alien race who's saying, don't come here, we don't want to meet you, and Kirk's like, fuck it, we're going to meet him anyway, and just goes there anyway. But in that case, Kirk had no reason to do it, where this ambassador guy is like, trying to save lives. But anyway, I'll open up the discussion. What is Fox being a moron here? Is this plot convenience, or is it somewhat justified?
Well, I mean, it's interesting how he brings it out, because he did mention that there have been thousands of people that have been lost over the years in this area, and if they did have access to this port, this might be able to avoid this. And I find it interesting, especially since later on, when the people on the planet do refer to that missing expedition that Spock talks about, was it the USS Valiant that disappeared in space, as they ended up being subject to this war. And so there's sort of a hint that perhaps all of these other ships tried to connect in, didn't listen, and were also lost in that. They're not totally specific on where these ships went. More the idea of having this port in the area might be helpful in recovering that or losing less ships. I find it interesting to think there might be so many people being like just lost in this war, going to one planet or the other. But in some ways, this is really an interesting point of interference, in a way, of third party, which again, you could say that America at the time, trying to make a treaty in with Vietnam and defending the war against the North and everything, inserted itself into a war for its own reasons, but not really being on one side or the other. In some ways, this is exactly it. He wants to get, relations no matter what. And by, going to the planet, even though that he was warned off, he effectively inserted the Enterprise into that. He inserted the Federation into this war because it wanted diplomatic, trade, or whatever arrangements. Everyone's kind of a brute force in this, whether it be Anon 7 on the planet, whether it be Ambassador Fox up here, or even the Enterprise crew trying to defend the Enterprise unto itself. Everyone's kind of a brute force, and it has to happen for the episode to happen and for us to have this conflict. But, I think overall Fox is just doing his job. But the fact that he's only focused on his job and not listening to the advice of the people around, the ones that actually have to go in, these soldiers, as it were. The diplomats are the ones getting the soldiers in trouble. Again, we're hitting on a lot of these war themes, I think, very clearly on how all of this works. And the fact is, he doesn't care. And if he was willing to maybe take a more circumspect route, investigate first before going in, or at least kept shields up the whole time, then some of the destruction, some of the issues may not have actually been forced onto the Enterprise.
Indeed. Alyssa, your thoughts?
So you asked, is he justified or is Ambassador Fox a moron? Moron! And he continues to become more and more of a moron all throughout the episode. He's downright idiotic, and he definitely is a plot contrivance. One I don't mind as much in this episode, but one that generally does bother me throughout the original series. This Commodore or Ambassador being a complete idiot, and but I love how Scotty pushes back, which we'll get to later in our discussion. But in this case, I think the whole mission is not very smart, because if they know about the Valiant disappearing, they know that people have tried before and they don't come back. Shouldn't they be prepared for something like this? They were just like, shouldn't they have expected to be warned off with code 710 or whatever? Like, shouldn't they have had a plan to begin with? Like, because they already knew, like, even before they got the code 710, they already knew, like, ships go in there and don't come back. And the fact that he's just shows complete disregard for that, and like, oh fuck it, we're going in there anywhere. It's very much like Kirk and Spectre the Gun to me. But it's interesting watching this that Kirk is taking the smart route. And a couple seasons later, he becomes the moron, and just like. So no, I don't defend him at all. I think the whole mission is flawed, the whole idea behind it, and it is a plot contrivance. One that I forgive because I really love this episode and the message that it has. But the whole Ambassador Fox aspect of this episode bothers me, except for the fact that I love how Scotty fights back against him. And I think we talked about in our previous stream how I wish Spock had done the same thing against that Commodore in the Doomsday Machine, that he should have been more like Scotty is. Yeah. But so that's the only like enjoyment that I got out of that character, is watching him get his ass handed to him by Scotty. But otherwise, his whole thing is a plot contrivance, and he's a moron, and it starts right here. So I don't defend him at all.
I'll defend Ambassador Fox. Like I don't know. Like personally, I don't think he's a plot contrivance. Like I think he does have at least a good point, but I do agree he's not making the right move here. But I think maybe that's because that's in his characters, because he's an ambassador, he's not a military tactician, and he's being stubborn, looking at the bigger picture and not listening to the advice from those who do know about military situations like Kirk. So I think he is making the wrong move here, but I buy it as a character renovation. But that's
I'm responsible for every member of the crew, every member of the 386 people on their ship. You're thinking about the mission. I'm thinking of them. Something came up for me.
Yes, yeah. Brandon's saying I'm being kinder to Ambassador Fox than he would, which is fair.
Well, and I do have to point out the first scene is greatly continued on everyone. How Fox just sort of comes off the turbo lift, says his lines, does a thing, and then gets back on the turbo lift and leaves. And the next thing, that's what he does. He gets off the turbo lift, he comes in, he orders people around, and then he goes back on the turbo lift and leaves. That's his whole job. That's what he does. He just sits in his room and then comes up.
Yeah, where is he going? Is he just going back to his quarters and just sitting there? Like, what is he doing?
Bringing up Galileo 7, I thought that Commodore was worse, because he would come up to the bridge and be like, remember, you have 5 hours, and then just fuck off again. But anyway. And also, like, I wish Kirk would have stood up to that Commodore in Galileo 7 the way Scotty stands up to the Ambassador in this episode. But anywho. Okay, so let's move on to the end. They go there anyway. They beam down to a matte painting, which actually I'm kind of impressed with for the original series. Like, for the original series, it looks good. And they meet everyone. And, there's like, they're all question box, like, I don't see any signs of war. And what's going on? We don't see any signs of war. And then Anon 7 was like, oh, yes, the war is very real. And then he doesn't explain what's going on. And then they actually see, battle simulation happen. And he's talking about, oh, the casualties are coming in. And everyone's looking around like, they call Scotty, is like, do you see any fucking weapons firing? Like, what the hell is going on again. And then they eventually in 9-7, and there was like, oh, and Spock figures it out. He's like, oh, they're fighting the wars with computers in 9-7. It's like, oh, of course, obviously, duh. Now, I don't know. This is what I found a bit like. First of all, I know this is like normal for them, for the Aminars or whatever they're called, and so maybe that's why they didn't think to explain it to Kirk. But when Kirk and Spock were acting all like, "Whoa, I don't understand what's going on," feel like they should have explained it to him, and I feel like Spock and Kirk should have figured this out sooner. I don't know. Am I being too mean to them? Alyssa, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know. I kind of read it as like, who cares about these people? Like, we're in the middle of a war here. Like, we don't have to explain shit to them. Like, if they don't get it, that's their problem. Like, like I don't see why they would feel the need to explain it to them. So, and I also like didn't. My take wasn't that they should have figured it out sooner. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that when I first saw this episode that I figured it out sooner. So I don't know. I don't fault them for not figuring it out sooner. In fact, it almost seemed like Spock figured it out of nowhere. Like there was really no evidence for it. He was just like, "Oh, it's computers." Like, where did you get that from? I don't know. So it just so I would almost go the opposite. That there was no reason for them to figure it out. There was no evidence for it at all, and he just kind of pulled it out of his butt.
Well. The first time I watched it, I thought, well, it took him long enough to figure this out. But maybe I had read a synopsis and I knew what was going on. But still, it's like I really felt like they should have figured it out earlier.
Yeah, I don't even think they should have figured it out when they did, because there was no evidence to that at all. He just like pulled that out of his ass.
Well, we're also used to computers and simulations here. Again, for the time frame that it was made, that would be kind of a revelation of like what's going on. And again, they do kind of stretch that period out of like, do you see anything? Do you sense? To address your point, Mark, I think the biggest mistake that Kirk made is as soon as he said there was an attack, he should have radioed the Enterprise and said, "Shields up, scanners on, what's going on?" But that would have protected the ship, and therefore they would not have lost it, and that wouldn't have allowed the plot to happen. But that was kind of my own real critique of like, you're kind of just taking it easy when they're saying there's an attack to not worry about.
That makes sense to me because they see no evidence of the attack. There's no weapons going around. There's nothing being destroyed. And they're like, are these people collectively insane or something? I don't see any attack going on. Like,
I mean, I just generally see Kirk as a little bit more of like, defensive and arms up first before anything else, so that if he heard there was an attack, just to let but again, it's a minor. I'm going to say it's a minor quibble.
Well, all right. So that kind of leads into the next thing I want to talk about, because you brought up, Darrin, that you should have raised the shields and the Enterprise would have been protected, but would it have? Like, would the Enterprise shields actually register on this simulation that these two planets are running between each other? And is it fair of them to attack an outside force that doesn't have the same computers or isn't on the same simulation that they're on? And other question would be, why would Vintikar attack the Enterprise in the first place? Because unless it was an accident and they didn't mean to, but then again, like, I don't know, why would they want to try to pull in the third party into their conflict, which is exactly what happens and has very bad consequences for them. Those questions.
To your first, I would say that it's the no. Our shields were up, so you didn't destroy us. We're still fine. You get that scoreboard. No, ultimately, I think you're right. I don't think they would care. Again, it's just all mathematical. I don't even know if they can detect what shields or anything that they have on, because obviously when they got shot at the first time by Onan 7 in a little bit, it didn't do anything to them because they had their shields up. So, whether or not it would actually have any effect, you're right. I think it's just all mathematical. And no, it's not fair. but it's a cheap target. I mean, it is the low-hanging fruit. You don't even have to get to the planet. You just go to the orbit right there. Just this little ship floating around. It's like the bonus point section of the game, I guess. But no, it is completely ridiculous that they shouldn't have been involved in all of that. But again, it's what needs to happen because we only have an hour, and we've got to get things moving forward.
I definitely read it as it was an accident. In fact, I thought Anon Seven, whatever his name is, said that they were collateral. I thought he said that it was an accident. Like, I'd have to watch it again, but I thought he said the Enterprise, was just collateral damage, or like I very much got the impression from the dialogue that it was an accident, that they weren't specifically targeting the Enterprise, because that wouldn't make any sense, but that somehow the Enterprise got in the crossfire.
Okay, but from my understanding, it's Ventikar that attacked them, right? Ventikar is the one, because that's why they need to kill them all, because they need to satisfy their agreement with Ventikar.
Yeah, and so Ventikar was firing at whatever that planet is, and the Enterprise was in the way. That's like what I read. I'd have to listen to the dialogue again.
Well, his
dialogue that implies that.
Yeah, his buddy, his underling, the other person that he talked to in that scene, did do that just like 50 years ago, which sort of implies that is what happened to the crew of the Valiant. Who, didn't have a Scotty on board and finally went down to shore leave. So that was my guess, is that whether it was in the area or what, that however their math decided that it was hit. It was B7 and they sunk their battleship.
So Anon 7 tells Kirk, well, you remember I warned you not to come, and now your ship has been declared casualty, so everyone needs to be down to die. And Kirk's of course like, no. And so they take them prisoner and hold them captive, and then Anon 7 calls up the Enterprise, imitating Kirk, doing the whole Terminator thing with Kirk's voice, and being like, "Oh, Scotty, everything's good here. Condition green, come and beam everyone down for shore leave." I mean, did he really think that would work? Like, what would they go to this hostile war environment, and all of a sudden they're saying, "Yeah, let's go all have vacation down on this planet"? Like, that is the weirdest thing. And of course, Scotty checks this and sees that the dude's voice has in fact been replicated, and figures out that that the guy was has Kirk captive, and so Scotty did not fall for his bullshit, and I thought that was a good scene. That it is the first thing that Scotty does, that he easily, I mean, maybe it was easy to see through this bullshit, but I'm glad that he did.
Well, McCoy kind of fell for it. I mean, McCoy was like, well, this seems odd, but I guess we're sure leaving. Scotty's like, no, wait a minute. I'm going to go check this out. And McCoy was like, what are you doing, Scotty? I don't know. Like, McCoy's an idiot. But Scotty saw right through it, which was the first badass thing that Scotty does in this episode. And he's like, immediately said, no, this doesn't make any sense. This has got to be a fake. There's no way that Captain Kirk would say that. And I love that. Because I feel like too often in TV and movies and in Star Trek itself, like somebody might fall for something moronic like that. So I love that Scotty saw through it immediately, even if McCoy was kind of an idiot. But so yeah, I kind of love it.
Cool.
Honestly, I love the kind of dialogue back and forth between McCoy and Scotty in this whole Upper Enterprise sequence, both this one and then later on. It's kind of a great back and forth. I love Scotty's very constipated, the ship's being attacked look on his face. He's like, which I always kind of enjoy on there. But I meant to say it before, and I've just as a blanket statement throughout this whole episode. The actor that plays Anon Seven, David Apachu, I think. I'm not sure if I'm getting his last name correct. Really pulls it. Real is dedicated to this role, this belief, how he approaches this, his apologetic sense, and how things are going out, how much he's kind of believing that this is going to be the cost for his civilization. He really commits in this episode, and I think it goes a far way in selling that viewpoint, and especially with him and back and forth with Kirk there. I think really sells the episode and really sells the danger and the kind of trauma that this country, this planet, has been perpetuating for the past 500 years. So just real quick, I wanted to get that out before I forgot that.
No, absolutely. All right, so they take them prisoner and they, stay in this nice little lounge room, and then they come up with this plan for Spock to use like his Vulcan telepathy to through the wall to mind control this guy to open.
I'm sorry, Mark. Vulcanian.
Yes, Vulcanian. God damn it! Pissed me off.
Don't ever say that again. Don't ever say that again. That's wrong.
They said it so much throughout the first season. It irritated the hell out of me. I was so glad when I got to the second season just so I didn't have to hear Vulcanian again. But then I do have to put up with Klingons up until like season 3. That probably pissed me off even more.
It takes a while to sort these things out.
At least there's no Orions.
Yes, Orions. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I think towards the end of season 1 they stopped doing the Vulcanian bullshit. But anyway, so yes, he just, I don't know, and they do this again in the episode by any other name. They actually call back to this event, but this seems a bit too much for me. It seems like the writers being like, oh, we need them to get out of the situation, let's just make up some shit that Vulcanians can do so that they'll be able to escape. Like, can Vulcans really put their hands against the wall and mind control someone to they obviously is, I think this is something they dropped in later canon, and I think for good reason. So this kind of irritates me. I don't know how you feel about this.
Well, it's just one of those things. If you watch the first season of the original series, there is a lot of things that get changed in canon. At the beginning, they weren't even called the Federation. They didn't have shuttlecrafts. They were Earth ships. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You go back and watch first season episodes where you just have to kind of pretend. I mean, Pike is a sexist bastard in the case. I mean, you just have to, pretend that. In today's canon, that's not actually what they said or what happened. And to me, I kind of put that in this category. It's season 1. It's same category as the Vulcanians. It's just a thing that they decided to drop. Is the thing in the first season, they very much haven't figured out what kind of show they're going to be. They didn't know that they were going to be 60 years later. We're still going to be talking about it. They had no idea. So they hadn't figured out the canon yet, so I just kind of dismiss it as one of those things, so it doesn't bother me that much.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but you've got to give it up for Spock and everyone, and again, their commitment to what they're doing. I do love Spock just slowly moving across the door, where's he standing, where do I find him, there he is, and then we sort of bring him back. I mean, look, Leonard Nimoy was awesome. Hats off to him always with his performance. But I love that kind of bit of dedication there to what he's doing. And even Kirk, I think there's a couple of shots behind where he's almost yeah, he's doing the thing now. Which was kind of fun. But, that's how you get out. And we have to go on our let's collect weapons and destroy disintegration chambers adventure, because so what landing party is complete without that?
Exactly. So that's actually what I wanted to talk about next. I'm going around gathering weapons, destroying all the disintegration chambers, purposely sabotaging the treaty that Aminar 7 has with Vindicar. And so this is when Kirk's crusade of wiping his ass with the Prime Directive begins, because yeah, this is kind of violating it. Like he's purposely trying to undermine this peace treaty that could result in very nasty things. I think it's fun, but it's a fun sequence. But is he kind of being a bad Federation captain here?
Well, here's the thing about the Prime Directive, and I'm going to do a little bit of a plug. I'm going to be doing, when I do my next top 100 video, I'm going to be spending some time talking about another first season episode, Errand of Mercy, and in that episode, Kirk suggests to the Organians, before he realizes who they actually are, that he's going to blatantly break the Prime Directive and like, oh, we're going to build up your schools and we're going to give you weapons and we're going to give you technology. And like, that is like the biggest thing against the Prime Directive ever. So the way that I would explain that, the same way I would explain this, is the show hasn't really decided what the Prime Directive really is yet. It has been mentioned before. It's been brought up, I believe, Return of the Archons. There's probably a couple other episodes, I'm forgetting, where it gets mentioned, but I don't think that it is as clearly defined as it is today. Like, I think that comes later. So I think they were still kind of figuring out what the Prime Directive was. And that's why Kirk gets away, I think, can get away with breaking what we now see as the Prime Directive. I think the Prime Directive has been mentioned as a non-interference clause, but I don't think it had been clearly defined. So that's kind of how I dismiss it.
From what I understood, I thought the Prime Directive only dealt with non-spacefaring planets. They've been spacefaring for hundreds of years. They just haven't left their planetary system, apparently. Also, since the Federation pushes them to have a treaty and gets them involved, I think he isn't bound by the
well, no, from what I understand, the Prime Directive is not just about non-spacefaring. I think that's his primary thing, but they also apply the Prime Directive, for example, to Bajor during Deep Space Nine. When the Bajorans kicked the Federation out off Deep Space Nine, the Admiral was just like, well, they're a sovereign planet. We can't interfere in their internal politics, even though the Cardassians are trying to take over the world. If we don't do something, they'll occupy the planet again. Has nothing to do with us, because we just gotta not interfere with them because they haven't invited us anymore.
Sure, that's fair, but I think once they blew up the Enterprise, that kind of was like, all bets were off at that point,
Yeah, they're kind of
involved. I didn't start this fight, but I'm likely to finish it.
Yeah, they're kind of involved at that point.
Yeah,
so.
But I still think that he's on shaky ground. Like,
oh, this is cowboy diplomacy all the way. Oh, this is like Kirk 101 right here. Yeah, I've decided what's right for you guys. And that's the way we're going to
go. Jordan Johnson asked, do we know what episode they first mentioned the Prime Directive? No. I'll have to
when I was watching, didn't my rewatch, and I was doing it in episode and air date order, which I know is different than what you do. They the first episode I noticed them mentioning it was Return of the Archons.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% that there wasn't an episode before that was where it was mentioned.
I do know that this is the very first episode they mentioned United Federation of Planets.
Yes.
They said the Federation in Arena, but this is the first time they said the United Federation of Planets.
Yes.
But the Prime Directive, yeah, I just rewatched it too, and I think by the end of season 2, the Prime Directive was solidified, and well defined. But that stage, like Spock would bring it up, and Kirk would be like, it's fine.
Well, that's what happened. We're breaking the Prime Directive. Prime Directive. And McCoy's like, loosen up, Spock.
It's more important that we save all these lives.
Yeah, but I believe it's Return of the Archons, which is before this episode.
Yeah. All right, so, pardon me, sir, but there's a multi-legged creature crawling on your shoulder. Sorry, I just had to mention that. I just love that. I thought that was hilarious. It was one of the things that always stuck out to me. Is this silly? Is it really in character for Spock? Probably not really, but I'm sorry. I fucking love it.
I feel it's really out of character for him. Like, it seems more in character with the Ethan Peck Spock than Leonard Nimoy Spock. Like, I could totally see Ethan Peck doing that. But the Leonard Nimoy Spock is completely out of character. But you know what? I don't care. I love it too.
And honestly, I love the slow walk back on that too. He gets the gun. It's just kind of like, okay, so we're cool. I'm just gonna head back here to my buddies, and it's all fine. And then the very calm, like, move away now, folks.
And the fact that the guy just falls for it, like these Starfleet prisoners that just escaped, and obviously one of them walks up to you, there's a multi-legged creature on your shoulder. He's like, huh?
Well, see, that's the bonus of not having the general alert that you've escaped yet. Then they can just be like, is this Paul on some costume day? I'm not sure. You know, all these people are coming up to get disintegrated. It's hard to keep track of them.
Yes. And what was it with the funny hats these guys are wearing?
That's what I was about to say. I was about to say. Take a moment to appreciate that. Like, some of the costume choices in the original series are just hilarious. I think some of the more ridiculous ones are the guards in the Ileana of Troyos episode. Like they just have these silly costumes, and the hats are just hilarious.
Yeah, the costume designer was like, big hats and sashes. Big hats and sashes, and that defines everyone. Yeah. And of course, soft light on the girls. Soft light on the girl close-ups there.
Yeah.
All right. So this is at the point where Anon 7 tries to trick the Enterprise once again because he finds out Kirk's going around destroying everything. And so he tells, calls up. It's like, no, everything's fine. Your captain's fine. He's having a drink and chilling and everything's all good. Why don't you just lower your shields and beam on down and everything's all well and good. And this is the part I have no respect for Ambassador Fox, because he falls for this bullshit and falls hook, line, and sinker. It's like, oh, yes, Mr. Anon 7, everything's fine. We'll do that. We'll just lower our defensive shields so you can blow us out. So we can beam on down, and everything's all well and good. And then we get this awesome moment with Scotty, where Scotty is like, when he is like, lower the shields, Mr. Scotty is like, no, I will not. And then Fox has a hissy fit and it's like, what? I'm giving you a direct order. And Scotty's like, yes, you are. And you could have me decommissioned and you could have me court-martialed, but I am not going to follow your order. And that was such a goddamn awesome moment. And yes, Alyssa, you're right. This is exactly what Spock should have done to counter Decker in the Doomsday Machine. Should have been like, oh, maybe I don't have any grounds to relieve you of duty, but I'm doing it anyway. Which eventually is what Kirk did once they got in contact with him. But anyway, that's Doomsday Machine. But yeah, here, Scotty absolutely stands up to him, and I love after Ambassador Fox fucks off again to go wherever he goes, and McCoy goes up to Scotty. He's like, "Well, you've done it now, Scotty." And he's like, the haggis is in the fire for sure." It's like exaggerating the Scottish thing, but yes, I thought this is an amazing man. Part of why I love this episode. So, Alyssa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love it so much, but I do need to point out that this is another one of those things you have to retroactively pretend that he said something different, because he refers to the shields as screens.
Oh yes,
because they haven't decided yet that it's called shields. Yes. They're calling screens.
I think they did that a lot in the first season.
Yeah,
screens. Yeah.
Yeah, he refers to them as screens. Like, I will not lower my screens. I'll have you court-martialed. But I'm still not lowering my screens. Like, it's so badass. I love it. I mean, it's the screens thing I just have to kind of ignore because they haven't decided it's called shields yet. But it is for me too. One of the things that I really loved about this episode that Scotty is such a badass. Unfortunately, he isn't always this way when he takes command. I think this is probably his best episode as the commander, and this is his first one.
Yeah, first time. Yeah.
And he then I noticed rewatching Errand of Mercy that in that episode, which I believe I don't know the production order, but I knew it aired after this one. Sulu gets left in charge. Scotty's not even in that episode. Sulu gets left in command. So they hadn't quite figured out the chain of command yet in the first season.
It was even in production order. It was after this one, and Sulu was also in command in Arena, which was before this one.
Yeah. In Errand of Mercy, Scotty's not even in that episode at all. It just goes right to Sulu. So they hadn't quite figured out the chain of command yet. But I think it's the second season when Scotty is solidified as as third in command behind Kirk and Spock. But this is his best episode as the commander. I love it.
Yeah. In fact, I don't think we have Sulu at all in this episode either.
No, Sulu's not in this episode.
I was wondering, I was like, is this before he's on board or where he's at? But yeah, because production and air date orders shifted around.
Yeah. Well, Sulu's on there from pretty much the beginning, so it's not.
Yeah. He was in Where No Man Has Gone Before, but he was wearing like a blue shirt or something.
Yeah.
Who's just that guy that we pull in when we need to? We can't just call him Navigator.
Yeah, but the original series is weird like that. That some people just completely disappear in certain episodes. Like Scotty and McCoy isn't even in Errand of Mercy, which is really weird. Just completely absent from an episode. So I guess it's just maybe the actor's schedules or something. I don't know.
Mainly what it is,
Because the original series is weird like that, where certain characters will just not be there for no reason. That's and Sulu, was it season 2 or 3 that Sulu was gone for a lot of the episodes?
Season 2, like George Takei was filming some movie or something. So
and Sulu is missing for a lot of it.
Yeah.
Now, considering that they hadn't finished setting things up and the shields are still screens, I'm assuming that explains why Fox is able to eventually beam down to the planet, because they haven't realized that you can't beam when shields are up.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, how did he beam down? I thought they refused to put the shields down.
But the thing is, I thought, isn't that what the excuse Non-7 was saying? Why he was asking to lower the screens? Wasn't he saying?
But Scotty refused to, and yet he still beams down anyway.
Yeah, he still beamed down. Like, I don't get that.
There is a mention that laser fire is not as powerful when the shields are all the way up. So there is kind of a reference. That's the only kind of limitation that they had. But yeah, I was curious. They eventually get a hold of Spock and they get further away and stuff. But that's after Fox has already beamed down.
All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about next. Ambassador Spock falling right into the trap and beaming down. And again, it's kind of happened in between commercial breaks, so it happened off screen, so you don't really know like how that transpired, how he got through the shields, the screens, or whatever, and why he did it. I don't know, but so it seemed later as Scotty talks about it, like he okayed it or whatever, or at least couldn't stop him from doing it and knew that he was doing it. But anyway, he beams down and he's like, yes, we're gonna get right to this, and the Non-7 goes right up to him. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna kill you now. And walk right into the disintegration chamber. And then Spock, of course, later comes along and saves him, and then Ambassador Fox starts to change his tune and starts to help Spock and everything. And that's why, I don't know, I don't think he's such a bad guy. I think he was obviously stupid for ordering Scotty to lower the screens, but like once he actually saw what was going on, like he was totally on board with. He didn't try to argue. He was like, "Well, we shouldn't be doing this, whatever." He was like, "Yeah, fuck it, let's blow some shit up." So, so I thought that was cool.
No, that was nice. The fact that he didn't maintain his sort of idiocy. Like once it really became very clear, like, no, man, they're just gonna march you into a disintegration machine. Then he realized, okay, maybe I don't have the key on this, and I need to listen to guys that have my back and guns. So that was fun, and I also love they did this with the with the arrival for Kirk and company as well. As they picked them up from the little spot they beam in, and like it's all great. Then we walk into the first hallway, and then we pause for the dialogue here to tell the ambassador, "Oh, by the way, I'm actually going to kill you. I just wanted you to get inside first before I spoiled it." But even when was it May tells Kirk, it's like, "Oh, you've picked a great place. It's wonderful. Come this way." And then we get inside, and it's like, "Why the fuck are you here? We told you to stay away. Why did you do that?" It's like, whoa, it's kind of a quick turnaround. They're like, "Hey, just wanted to chastise you real quick. All right, we'll take you to the boss now." I love those little bits. But again, they use their three hallways that they build beautifully. I happen to point out to my kid, like, "Ooh, check out the Technicolor lighting," and they really digged it. They were like, "Ooh, this is what you do when you have short budgets. Get some good texture on the walls and some bright lights, and everything looks great." So, again, they pulled off their stuff really well.
Yeah. Well, back to the point of Ambassador Fox and how he ends up not being a bad guy. I mean, yeah, once it's really obvious and in his face, I mean, he finally does the right thing, but it's way too little, way too late, in my opinion. He's still a moron and a plot contrivance through most of this episode. Even eventually, once it's in his face and he's about to die, he finally realizes what's happening. But I also kind of wanted to address something in the chat that Brandon wrote earlier,
Sure.
because I was thinking the same thing. He says, "I was wondering why the planet dwellers had disruptors." So I was thinking the same thing as I rewatched this episode. If they're fighting their whole war by computers, why do they have actual weapons on hand at all?
Well, I would say it's probably to intimidate and make sure citizens actually step into the disintegration chambers. And
yeah, but I got the impression that nobody ever refused. So
I mean, I think by and large, but I think there would always be the rare dissenter, and they would probably do it just in case,
That makes sense. Yeah, I could go along with that. Yeah.
And we saw, there was graffiti and stuff for homeless people around, but I'm sure that there's some form of crime that happens on the planet. So you have to have, an armed police force. They got khaki pant wearing groups there as well. I mean, sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I just figure it's military, so you're going to have weapons of some sort. I think it's easier. Then you get the cool whoa and stuff blowing up, which is, what the first season's all about.
With invisible rays. Out of
yeah.
All right, so Kirk tries to he captures Anon 7, holds him at disruptor point, but then Anon 7 tricks him. Like, "Oh," he's like, "Where's your computers?" And he's like, "Oh, it's just right in that hallway right there. Just step through that door." And Kirk realizes it's a trap and tries to throw Anon 7 out, but he still gets captured and he's being held captive. And Anon 7 calls the Enterprise, try to be like, "We have your captain. We're going to kill him." But Kirk yells out to Scotty, "Scotty, General 24 in 2 hours, Scotty." So this is a very controversial thing that I want to talk about. General Order 24. So we find out that it's an order that exists on the Starfleet books to completely destroy and annihilate the entire population of a populated, civilized planet. Now, I've had discussions with people on my channel in the comment section about this, and some come up with interesting theories about why this exists, and maybe it's not intended to be used on a heavily populated planet, or maybe there's certain circumstances where it might be necessary. But I kind of question why this order exists in the first place, and moreover, question Kirk's implementing it at all. Like, what would happen if, like, everything wasn't able to work out, and they weren't able to destroy the computer, and the non-7 didn't comply? Would have Scotty actually destroyed the planet and killed absolutely everyone? Now, my headcanon had always been that he's just bluffing. This is just, Kirk likes to bluff. This is a bluff. But nothing in this episode actually indicates that. And especially the way they talk about it, where Scotty, we see scenes with Scotty talking to like McCoy on the bridge and stuff. He never says, "Oh yes, Kirk is bluffing." He's right out saying like, "We're going to destroy this planet." And so I get the impression that he's not bluffing, that everything in this episode is telling me that. And if that's the case, what makes them seem more like Klingons or more like the Terran Empire? Like, I don't think it's okay under any circumstance to kill billions upon billions of people. Like, I think, like, someone made the comparison to Picard. He would rather blow up the entire Enterprise D than be responsible for wiping out an entire civilization. It's just genocide. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on this? Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I kept waiting for the line that, it was a bluff. We weren't really going to do it, but then never comes. And as Scotty is saying, we're going to blow up your cities, you see the look on Uhura's face, and she's horrified by it. She's like, what? We're really going to do this? Like, she has this look on her face, like, I can't believe we would do this. And so I'm waiting for General Order 24 is actually just a bluff. That's all it really is. Like, when I say General Order 24, we'll pretend that we're going to blow up the planet, which I think would be a stupid thing to have on the books too, to have a bluff order on the books, or maybe it's just some code that they had like come up with amongst themselves. That that would make more sense to me. But I kept kind of waiting for that to be the case, but it's not, and it does a little bit undermine the anti-war message of this episode, that our heroes were going to commit genocide. Like, they were prepared to commit genocide. Like, that is definitely, that's definitely an issue. So, we can try to justify it now. Again, it's one of those things that they hadn't quite decided what the Federation would be, and this is the first episode where they call the United Federation of Planets and their values and those sorts of things. Same thing with the, and the menagerie, where there's a death penalty for going to a planet, which is ridiculous in today's, version of the Federation. Like, they wouldn't have a death penalty for anything, as least of all visiting a planet. So I kind of put it in that category, but to watch it now is still like, wow. Like, they thought that this was okay, and this is an anti-war episode. So it definitely is a flaw. It definitely is a mark against the episode, in my opinion. I still have it ranked pretty highly. I still not quite as highly as you do, but we'll talk about that later. But I still think of it as an overall great episode. But this definitely is a red mark against it, in my opinion.
See, the way I look at it is, the Federation is, at least effectively at this point in Star Trek, still a military organization. So you are going to have orders ranging from the most benign to the most destructive. So the fact that the Federation has a General Order 24 doesn't really surprise me, that it would ever be, what it would be used, because aren't they still effectively at war with the Klingons?
No, there's a peace
or...
treaty.
There's a peace treaty, all right. But again, it's
peace treaty, yeah.
I see the Federation still at this stage is less just exploration and still more of a military arm. That's certainly how Kirk tends to play it.
I think it's also I don't think that the Federation in this time period was more militaristic. I think that the show made it more of a military organization in the 60s because
Sure.
Enterprise, they're like, no, we're not military, we're the explorers. And that happened before this. And Discovery, they're like, we're not military, we're explorers, and except for when they were in the Klingon War. But otherwise, like, if they're not actively in a war, they will constantly, and all the other Star Trek shows, including Enterprise, which happens 100 years before this, the Starfleet is not a military. They're very clear, we're not a military, we're explorers. And so, but I think it's, again, another one of those things that gets changed later, that they did kind of present it as more of a military organization in the 60s, which gets retconned later, that it wasn't a military organization as much.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying is I think the fact that they have a General Order 24 to me is not necessarily surprising. But I do have to agree that I do believe that it was used as a bluff, even if it was never brought out. Like, hey, thank God, because we were bluffing. We never would have wanted to have done that, or any callback to it. I think it was just showing how dedicated Kirk is in order to push an On-7 to accept that, oh my God, you are barbarians, you're crazy, you're going to do something like this. What's wrong with you? I think, again, he has to put the horror of actual war into him. So, again, was this ever mentioned before? Is General Order 24 ever mentioned again? I don't know.
No, it's not. It's not ever mentioned again. But I get why he's doing it. But my thing is, like, I really don't think there's any circumstances that this would be okay to destroy an entire planet. I don't think General Order 24 should exist in Starfleet, even as it's portrayed in the 60s. Like, it's basically genocide. Like, there shouldn't be an order to commit genocide and wipe out an entire planet.
Sure,
right.
And having a shot of like Scotty or everyone just like General Order 24. Nobody ever brought that up. That's just one of those. I think it was just brought out, but the fact that they don't use it ever again, I think definitely solidifies more of how we see Starfleet now. But
it's definitely Terran Empire vibes that I was.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it is. It's a crazy military thing. Like, why the heck would you do it? But I guess if you're going to bluff, it has to exist so that you can't be like General Order 24. What's the captain talking about there? There is no General Order 24. Is that?
Yeah.
What do you think you were thinking about?
You seem to be convinced that it was a bluff, but there's no evidence in this episode.
Yeah.
So we can kind of dismiss it and go, oh, they must have been bluffing, but there's no evidence that they actually are in this episode.
Like, I would have liked it if they were. I think we needed a line of Scotty saying, "Oh yes, the captain's bluffing. He's trying to scare them into complying or whatever." That's all. That's all you needed to have. Is just that one line of dialogue, and then maybe it was something that Kirk just made up and told Scotty about before, and they had it like a kind of slide. Hey, if I ever say General 24, try to act like you're about to destroy the whole planet.
Sure. And you're right. That would have
made that clear. It would have been okay, but
a line of dialogue like would have been nice. But I don't think it's right that we should totally pass up the great scene between Kirk and an On-7, where Kirk is definitely the most je ne sais quoi, I don't care, wandering around the blaster and the gun and having a drink and just come this way. We're gonna go out the door together. I love that scene, and also just the great single shot. I think there were maybe two cuts in it, big fight scene that you get with a lot of the old shots where we're doing one camera shot here. He's going to be in the front, he's going to be in the back, then we're just going to drag him off down the hallway.
Isn't this one like Kirk throws an On-7 at all those security dudes and they're like bowling balls and being knocked over?
Knocks him down, grabs him, hits his arm, and then goes across forth. Now one guy gets a great right cross on Kirk before he ends up hitting him on the back, and you get to see his front, so that's definitely Shatner falling to the ground, getting kicked up, being dropping his weight and getting dragged off by these two extras. Or stunt guys, I guess it would be at the time since they did the fight. I just love that kind of old classic fight styles. It's ridiculous and over the top, but it's very committed and it's not edited to crap. You know,
So
like,
yeah. So regarding General Order 24, Jordan Johnson in the chat says Section 31 wrote it. I could buy Section 31 doing it, but they should not have. I don't know.
should it be a general order? Right.
Yes. But
Well, I guess this was afterwards where Roddenberry was like, oh, okay, maybe we did go a little too far. We're gonna pull back. We're gonna try and for season 2, we're focusing on what the Federation is. Okay, everyone?
yeah, and J Came in 99 in the chat says United Earth Space Probe Agency. Yes, but in this planet, I mean this episode, Ambassador Fox particularly said, I'm a representative of the United Federation of Planets. So the first time we hear that. But anywho, so yeah, I wanted to get into the whole conversations that Anon 7 has with Kirk. Because before he orders General 24, but when Kirk is holding him at gunpoint, he's telling you, you're a barbarian and all this sort of thing. But after the General 24, he's like, you can't do it. He's like scared out of his fucking mind. He's pleading with him. He's like, you can't do this. And he's like, well, as like you said, I'm a barbarian. I got to do it. And he's like, Anon 7's like being adamant. It's like, you're asking me to do something. I have no choice. I have to continue this war. There's nothing I can do about it. It's like you want the bloodshed, and Kirk says something like, oh yeah, so you're finally noticing that war is bloody, huh? and so yeah, and so I like this interchange between them, and I like the badass way that Kirk is reacting to him. And as you mentioned earlier, Darrin, the actor who plays Anon 7 does an absolutely excellent job, particularly in these scenes when he does come off as someone totally desperate. But anyway, Alyssa, you have any thoughts on this?
On the Kirk and Anon 7 exchange?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Kirk is badass. I think in some of my favorite Star Trek episodes, Kirk is badass. Some of my least favorite, he is not. So yeah, I don't really have a lot to add to it. I just do have to say that there's one little tiny thing that I just have to overlook, because it's not just this episode, as many Star Trek episodes and across multiple shows, that they have aliens referring to a very specific Earth culture, which in the past, which is barbarians, and acting like they should know what that means, where they definitely should not. But I just accept that that's just a thing that happens. Like, why would aliens far away be referring to barbarians when it refers to a very specific thing from Earth's past? But there's a lot of things like that in Star Trek. I just overlook it. But it does, like, when I hear it, it just like gives me a little bit of a little tiny bit, but I dismiss it.
Well, and I also like the kind of dedication of the arguments here. Is Anon 7 is basically is like, look, we are accepting that we are barbarians, we're killers, we're murderers, and that this is the way that we are. So we've tried to find the best way to maintain our culture and still indulging in that, which again is that kind of sanitizing viewpoint. You've accepted almost too much without that willingness to change, to do something different, which is eventually what comes the big discussion afterwards, and not killing today. But you do kind of like that. Again, because the core of the episode really ends up being this kind of physical or philosophical argument and discussion is, what is better, accepting who we are and finding the most benign way to maintain our culture and everything as these creatures, or do we fight this every moment, every day? And if we fall into it, do we accept this death and destruction that goes on around us? And again, it's kind of an interesting two ways of doing it. It's like, look, if the only way to avoid war is to be emboldened in the absolute horror of it, that's the only way to kind of snap you out of this languid acceptance of what your fate is. Are you accepting your fate and who you are, or are you fighting for change and to improve, even if you might fail at times. And I think between Anon 7 and Kirk, that's the real interesting, real discussion going on. Kirk willing to go into the violence because he's experienced it, and Anon 7 thinking that any actual violence has to be the most horrific possibility at all.
Yeah.
And once you start down the path, you don't stop, because obviously his limit is, if we don't do it, then they're going to shoot at us, and then we're going to shoot at them, and then everything will all be destroyed. You know, for him, it's one or the other. We accept who we are, or we submit to who we are. Yeah.
Yes, I really would like to address Jordan Johnson in the chat saying, remember, Picard almost gave this order himself, and I, Borg, and also Starfleet Medical against the Changelings. Now, first of all, the Changelings was not Starfleet Medical. That was Section 31. And we talked about earlier how Section 31 would definitely do something like this. So that's different. It wasn't officially Starfleet, although Starfleet condoned it but did nothing to stop it. But with Borg, I'm going to say the situation was different. And ultimately, Picard decided not to do it because he realized that it wasn't the right thing to do. But the Borg they were justifying it at first by saying the Borg is a bit different. He even says this when Crusher was arguing against him. He's like, you're just going to genocide all these innocent civilians. Picard's response, there is no civilians amongst the Borg. The Borg is just one single consciousness. And whether or not he's right is something up to debate, and he actually went against it himself. But I think ultimately it's a situation I buy. Let me put it that way. Whereas compared to this, I don't buy.
Yeah, it was a civilization that was intent on wiping out humanity, and that's all they want to do. They can't be reasoned with. Their whole point of existence is to assimilate cultures and wipe out cultures, and that's all they wanted to do. So yeah, you're defending yourself potentially in that scenario, whereas here it's just like gonna wipe out innocent people, like and
just to save one starship.
And that seems to be what General Order, and just to be clear, Picard doesn't give General Order 24. General Order 24 is mentioned in this episode. It does not exist anywhere else. The fact that there would be an order on the books called General Order 24 to wipe out millions of innocent civilians makes no sense, and is completely different from what Picard does to a species that is actively trying to wipe them out and can't be reasoned with. Totally different scenario.
Well, yeah, because I think General Order 24 just rings punitive, which I think is even a term that Fox uses. You'll use no punitive measures against these. I guess he was just talking about photon torpedoes at the time. But still, yeah, it's punitive. Whereas I think against the Borg, because as you say, there are no civilians, the only way to wipe them out is you have to wipe them all out, because any survivors will just replicate and attack you again. It's more of a fighting a life-sized virus, really, versus fighting what is in this mostly civilians, because again they have no army because they don't actually fight.
All right, so they end up Kirk gets the better of them and manages to hold them, all these guys, by disruptive point, and Spock comes in. It's like, well, I came to rescue, but I see you don't need you don't need my help. And Kirk's like, no, I could use your help now. And so they go in and destroy the computers. And so there they go. They completely destroyed Anon 7 ability to make war, and then that's when we get the big speech. Anon 7's of course freaking the fuck out. It's like, oh, you did it now, and then we get this big speech with Kirk. Is like, make peace, do it, and it's like, but we're barbarians. We had to kill. We admitted it to ourselves. And it's like, yes, but we're not going to kill today. No, I actually disagree with this philosophical standpoint that Kirk and Anon 7 has, that it's human nature to kill, that you absolutely have to fight it. But that's a whole nother discussion there. But it's just the whole thing that it's their natural state to be be barbarians and kill each other. It's not something I actually believe, but there's a whole philosophical thing I could get about that. So that kind of annoyed me a bit, this whole conversation. But the bigger point I want to talk about here is, so of course Kirk is right. Of course they do make peace, and he convinces them to make peace. But it was quite a risky thing, like destroying this computer that was going to force this hot war, because he bet that Vindicar would be just as scared of a real life war as Anon 7 was. But what if he was wrong? What if they're like, all right, yeah, cool, they want to do a real war, let's do this instead. And all these other people ended up dying. I mean, some people could argue that, well, they were all dying already, so he didn't really change anything, just the shape of the war. But I don't know. This has got to be a huge violation of the Prime Directive. I don't know. Yeah, Darrin, what are your thoughts on this?
Vindicar is Mars. So yeah, they've just been waiting for the actual war to start this entire time. Expanse reference, folks. So yeah, I mean, is it reckless of him? Yes, but that's really kind of Kirk's way. Is definitely a shoot first, ask questions later, jump in both feet, and then worry about looking for where we're landing. He definitely plays it that way. It's interesting. They talk so much about with this shared thing that we are the same. We both have to accept our stuff, and it's like, so we're just accepting that human beings are just, again, at this stage, just scattered throughout the universe, kind of like Battlestar Galactica side. There was just tribes of humans that established everywhere, because they could have entirely different histories. They don't have to be the same. The Anons, God, I keep saying Anon 7 because I just think of the guy, whatever the planet's name, wherever they're from.
Aminar 7 or something?
Aminars, yes. The Aminarians.
Yeah.
That everybody is still human and thus have that same kind of background of biology. I found that the acceptance of that as an argument point between them was very much kind of comical. But yeah, it's again, what are you? What do you accept? And I think for the sake of this episode, they just focused on, yes, we may kill, but we can choose not to. And that's kind of an easier thing of like, well, but do we have to kill? I think starts to become a larger philosophical question, which I'm sure there's another episode where they actually tackle that. But yeah.
All right, a couple things I want to address in the chat first. Jordan Johnson's saying, you will now answer the charge of being a grievously savage child race. And I just watched Encounter at Farpoint, so that just stuck in my mind. And then Jake came in 99 saying, apparently Garth used General Order 24. What about Cisco? He poisoned the planet. Garth attempted to use General Order 24, and his crew mutinied and stopped him from doing it because he was criminally insane. And Cisco, look, Cisco gave them plenty of time to evacuate. Nobody was harmed. They just went and settled that other Cardassian planet, so they were fine. Anyway.
Yeah, I still wanted to address what you said earlier about what's that other planet called?
Vindicar?
Vindicar. How Kirk was making a bet. He was gambling that they would respond the same way, and what if they didn't? I think it was a pretty high odd bet, though. I think it was a very safe bet, because they would be in the same situation as whatever those people are called, Minarian Sevens people. they would be in the same boat where they are also detached from war because they are in that same war. So why would they not be in the exact same situation? So I think it's a very, very low risk bet. Like I think the chances of them responding any differently, being Mars, as Darrin says, are I would say I would say less than 1% that that's going to happen. Like, because they are in the same exact war, they're going to respond the same way. So I think that Kirk made a very smart bet in that. In that, now was it 100% certain that he was going to be right? No, but Kirk. That's the thing about Kirk is that he takes risks and and they pay off. And I think that's the whole quality of mercy thing is Kirk sometimes taking the risks is what pays for them. So I think that but he takes calculated risks. I would not say it's reckless at all. I think is there 100% chance it's going to be that it's going to work out? No, but it's a very smart calculated risk, and I think that's what Kirk does when he's at his best.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Except I think that the chance of failure is much higher than 1% because it's not just that Vindicar are going to be a bunch of war hungry assholes, but that he's taking a chance that a peace is going to work, and these two, worlds obviously have a long standing hatred that's not easy to wipe out. I mean, just think of long-standing conflicts like in the Middle East and whatnot, where this hate's been going on for centuries, and this war has been going on for centuries as well. So it doesn't seem. So I think the chances that this could fail and they could end up saying, "Well, fuck it, we'd rather if we're going to have to fight a live war, let's do that." I think the chances. I would put it at least 20%, maybe 25%.
Oh, no. I was talking about that one specific thing that you mentioned, that the chances of the Vindicars responding differently from the other people
okay.
1%, just that specific thing. Now, I'm not talking about the overall picture. If you're talking about the overall picture, yeah, there is a greater chance of failure there. But the odds are he's still taking a calculated risk there. But when I said the 1%, I was talking about one specific thing about the Vindicarians, how they would respond. But yeah, overall, there's definitely a chance of failure. But that's what Kirk does. He takes risks. And I think it was a smart risk, though. And it worked out for him because the episode has to happen. So, yeah.
So, and I think, again, because of how it was played, he was able to see how Anon 7 was terrified of any actual exchanges, how accepting he was of the status quo and that our culture's around it and how horrified this idea is. I think for him, it's easy to kind of elaborate like, yeah, I bet they probably are lazy and used to this whole experience too. And actually going to war would probably scare the shit out of them as well. So I think in a way, because they were of the same race, because he said they used to be us, they settled the planet, and then we became enemies. A reasonable expectation, seeing how terrified of any actual war that Anon 7 was, that he could elaborate on that. So I got to agree with Alyssa. I think there was a safer bet, but it was still, again, you're still risking a lot of lives, on a hunch. Which I believe is what Spock kind of refers to later on.
I don't know. This might be like totally different, maybe not completely comparable to this episode. But I was thinking of that Deep Space Nine episode, Battle Lines, the season 1 episode where they go to that planet, in the Gamma Quadrant. There are these warring people who can't die, but they keep like fighting each other. And as Mike from Breaking Bad is there, and they make and so Cisco tries to make an alliance with these two. It's like, look, you can keep fighting each other and getting killed over and over again, or we can work together to get off the planet. I have the technology to get you off. We can save you. And they're like, yeah, sure. Whatever, and then just go back to killing each other. And so, I mean, but that is quite different, maybe. But it could, the blood hate could be that thick where they would rather continue dying than actually work together.
Well, you also have, and I don't know what season this is, and again, forget me for not remembering the name of the episode, but with our half-face people.
Let that be
But
your last battlefield. Yeah.
yeah, but he's light on the right side and dark on the left. That's a totally different thing. And that there is one where they are willing to literally fight to the last man and death amidst a destroyed world to continue that battle. So, I mean, that's kind of the other side of the coin on something like this, who's the actual horror of war gets them to stop. And something like that, the horror of war still commits them to continue the fight.
Yeah. So Jake Heyman 99 says that was the problem with this episode. For all we know, the other side wasn't killing themselves. They only showed the one side of the conflict. Well, I think it was understood that both sides have ways of verifying that deaths take place, which is why Anon 7 was so terrified that they weren't keeping up their numbers and killing as many people as they were, because the Vindicar would clearly see that these people aren't dying and be like, hey, what the fuck? And so I think there's some work, some system they had to ensure that they were actually killing themselves.
Yeah, I was about to address that as well. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That we know the Vindicarians were doing the same thing, because otherwise then the shoe would be on the other foot, and then they would be like, hey, what the fuck? You Vindicarians aren't killing your people, so you're breaking the treaty. Now we're going to kill you. So yeah.
They had talked about the computers being tied into each other through some subspace connection, so they could work both and everything back and forth and keep track of things. So yeah, in a quick little hand brushing of like, oh yeah, they can verify our stuff and we can verify their stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how they handled it. It would be a slightly more comical. Maybe this would be a lower decks version where they go to Vindicar and they never did that. And they thought that they were just games. And they just continued on with their culture afterwards. That would be so mean. So mean.
But then, yes. Well, I don't know. I'm not that hard on Mr. Ambassador Fox. I think he's all right because he steps up here and he steps up and when Kirk is trying to convince Anon 7 to make peace, Ambassador Fox steps right in and he's like, "Hey, I can be the negotiator. I can help you out in these negotiations. I can use my expertise as a Federation ambassador, smooth things out." And he actually stays behind and does help them because, I think he had the best interest at heart, and when it is time for him to step up and do what he does. And so I thought that was a cool way to sort of end the episode.
Yeah, but why would you want a crappy ambassador? And he's not very smart. I think
he was a stupid idiot, but he didn't stay a stupid idiot. Totally.
All right.
He did have a snappy outfit. I mean, come on, that no. This is when the costume is the best. Though it's nice. There were a couple of shots of Kirk there where you can see some nice swole arms underneath his shirt there when he's grabbing May and is like, "You've got to tell me, what are the plans here? Do you want to die?" Like, yeah. All right, I believe you because you're so big and strong. Yeah. I'm glad we've progressed as a society more than that.
I'm glad acting has improved a lot since the 60s. But anyway, so that is it. That's the episode of A Taste of Armageddon. So I gotta ask of course, I think Alyssa kind of gave this away already, but ask the question at the end of every stream. Where would you rate this in your own personal top 20? And I realized pretty soon, Alyssa, I'm going to know the answer to your question going forward. You're releasing your top 100, but that's all good. But yeah, Darrin, we'll start with you. Would you have this higher, lower, around the same as I did?
Honestly, I would say it probably around the same, maybe slightly higher. It depends. Again, I haven't gone through a lot of the other episodes, so it's hard to kind of guess with some of the other stuff, though. There's at least a good half dozen in my head that I'm like, oh yeah, these are classic episodes across all the series.
Yeah.
but yeah, I think this is probably roughly about where I would put it. It's one of those episodes that again really nails what the original series did so well in posing a lot of these more philosophical questions in a very straightforward way. I think the performances were actually really good. I enjoyed the artwork, as ridiculous as the hi hats and the sashes might have been. Um, they did commit to a look, uh, and nobody really played it. There wasn't goofiness in here per se, as everybody I think was committed to the story that they were being told, and outside of just the melodrama of the style of show, I think this carried on
Well, the
really well.
goofiness, except for the multi-legged creature crawling on your
Well,
shoulder.
yeah, I mean, but again, that's the intentional stuff, the intentionally ridiculous. There are other episodes of Star Trek that are just way more over the top, or just
Yes.
are
Yeah.
laughing at the story that they're telling. Here, I think everyone realized, regardless of what the limitations of budget, performance, and all of those things at the time, there was a vision of what story was being told here, and I think they pulled it off in some of the best ways that the original series can. So I think this is a pretty good place in the top 25.
Cool. I did real quick want to answer Jordan Johnson's question. Have you reviewed that episode? I haven't seen it in a long time. If you're talking about this episode, I've reviewed every episode of the original series. I just finished covering every single. This one I actually did like 7 or 8 years ago, but every one of my reviews of the original series you can find on my channel. I have a playlist, 2 playlists really, that have all the original series episodes I've reviewed, so you can check it out there. But anyway, Alyssa, higher or lower, around the same.
I think Jordan was talking about the Deep Space Nine episode you were referring to earlier.
Oh, which Deep Space Nine episode?
He says, after that, he says, I haven't seen season 1 Deep Space Nine in a while.
Oh, Battle Lines. Oh, sorry, that one. Okay, sorry. I misunderstood. You're not talking about this one. You're talking about... No, I actually haven't done that. I will get to that eventually, but it's going to be a long time. I got to get through Next Generation first. But anyway, yes. So, Alyssa...
So, Mark, so far you have a talent for picking episodes in my number 50 through 26 range that is going to be next month's video. In fact, it'll be early July, so just in a couple weeks, that video will be out. And finally, I will get to a bunch of these episodes that you keep putting in your top 25. In fact, we've covered 4 episodes so far. 3 out of the 4 are in my 50 through 26 range. The other one was Reunion, which is number 53. So kind of close to that. So you keep, so you're picking. If you're looking at the general 53 through 26 range, you keep picking it. I'm not going to give away the exact number, because that video hasn't come out yet. I don't want to spoil it, but it's in that 50 to 26 range. So you're right. Pretty soon you will already know, because I'm going to catch up with you pretty shortly. I will be starting my top 25 in August, and I'm going to be done through number 11 by the time August is over. So I will be way ahead of you at that point. And so at that point, you'll know, unless you pick something in my top 10, you'll know where the episodes are precisely. And I'll be able to come on here and say, well, that is my precise number. But at this point, I'm only giving you a range, 50 to 26. So it's interesting because I'm seeing our top 25s are shaping up very differently from each other, because you have yet to pick one that's in my actual top 25. You keep picking ones that I have ranked lower, so I can only assume that the ones that I have ranked in my actual top 25, you would have ranked lower.
Probably. That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But eventually there's going to be some crossover, because I know we do have some some opinions of the episodes that we both like a lot. So it's only a matter of time before you hit on something that is also in my top 25. And then one day you might even hit on something that I have ranked even higher than you. I mean, that's bound to happen eventually.
I think it will happen.
Yeah, it will definitely happen eventually. Not yet. So far, these are all still episodes that I love. I am not saying any of them like suck or anything like that. I just have them ranked slightly lower than you.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that eventually we'll also get to some episodes that were ranked in your 100 between 176 will be in my top.
You mentioned that before. I'm really curious what episodes those are.
I'm surprised. I thought you'd be able to figure it out because
I keep trying to guess. Like I keep trying to I don't know what episodes. Yeah, I have some guesses, but I'm not. Yeah, that's interesting.
All right. So, yeah, that's it. I guess we're done. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. Everyone in the chat, Jordan Johnson, Brandon Neal Howes, Jay Kamen 99, anyone else, of course, watching live or watching in the archives. Thanks so much for checking us out. And thanks for watching. And, of course, thank you, special guests, Darrin and Alyssa, for joining me. If you want a big quick shout out, what you're doing, what you're up to, where people can find you, Darrin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you can catch me over at D's Reviews. We're about to kick off our review of Secret Invasion, which is debuting, I think, tomorrow night at midnight, basically the 21st, on Disney Plus. We'll be covering them, all 6 episodes, every Thursday at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. It'll be myself and Rob Stone from Smirking Reviews and some rotating guests, including these lovely people right here, will be on in just a few weeks. So really excited about that show. And then also I've been doing audiobooks. I've got a nice trilogy of books right there. Teeth of the Rakshasa is the first one, followed by The Raptor's Nest and The Temple of Andromeda. You can find all of those on Audible. Author B.J. West, or look up under my name, Darrin Jakes.
All right, Alyssa?
All right, you can find me on Alyssa Jean Reviews. I am doing my Star Trek Top 100, as I have talked about. I'm up at this point. I have gone through number 51, and next month, early July, will be 50 through 26, where I will hit on a bunch of the episodes Mark's already added to Top 25, among many other episodes. So you should check out that. I'm also doing Strange New Worlds reviews weekly. Enjoying that show. And also a couple things upcoming. I am actually right now right smack in the middle of my review for Black Mirror. So when you see my Black Mirror season 6 review, you'll realize I'm wearing the same thing because I'm literally like in the middle of recording it. I have to go back to recording it after we finish this. So that should be out hopefully tomorrow. And then I'm doing my Lower Decks Season 2 review, which should be out on Friday, where I have gone back and rewatched all the episodes of Lower Decks and kind of giving my thoughts on what Lower Decks, what I think of it now. So that's another thing that I'm working on. So come on over to Alyssa Jean's Reviews and check out all that stuff.
Awesome. And if you're finding me for the first time, my name is Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity. At the moment, like Alyssa, I just reviewed Black Mirror Season 6. I just uploaded my review for that earlier today, so you can check that out. I'm also uploading, making public a lot of all of my animated series, Star Trek the Animated Series episode reviews that I did like 4 years ago for my Patreon supporters. Every single day I'm uploading another one, making it public, so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And then starting next month, I'll start covering Next Generation Season 1. Oh, God. And God, I don't know why I was looking forward to Next Generation, but I'll just power through Season 1. It'll get better. But yeah, that's what I'll be covering. And of course, covering Strange New Worlds as that comes out as well. Really excited about this new season. I just love the show so much. So check out my channel for that. Check out these guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.